Now to our special report on Trump critics turned sycophants. This week, politicos have focused on another reality show-style twist, Anthony Scaramucci turning on his boss. In normal times, White House officials don't lash out like that, but consider a wider shift inside the GOP with policy consequences. Think of it as the reverse mooch. Republicans turning from scolds to supporters. And there's one prominent example you've surely seen, Lindsey Graham.
I think he's a kook. I think he's crazy. I think he's unfit for office.
I am like the happiest dude in America right now. We've got a president and a national security team that I've been dreaming of. I am all in. Keep it up, Donald.
That doesn't add up. You can't be happy about a, quote, crazy kook being president. And Graham works with Trump a lot these days, but other Republicans have gone further from running against Trump to working for him.
Donald Trump's candidacy is a cancer on conservatism, a toxic mix of demagoguery and mean-spiritedness and nonsense.
My hat's off to you for taking that stand and for sending a clear message around the world.
Then there's the former Trump critic at the white-hot center of this White House, occupying a hub of Trump chaos, the same position filled and vacated by Reince Priebus and then John Kelly, except his title is lower than theirs. I'm talking about Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney.
Yes, I'm supporting Donald Trump. I'm doing so as enthusiastically as I can, given the fact that I think he's a terrible human being. But the choice on the other side is just as bad.
There's all kinds of stuff going on, but it's pretty wild that this is the state of federal staffing. And it's like the 12th most prominent story to even think about. This is not normal, and it's telling. Donald Trump is not known to forgive grudges or overlook these kind of things, but he's so desperate for bodies that in an administration with record-breaking turnover, he's hired or teamed up with people who call him a kook and crazy, unfit for office, a cancer on conservatism, a terrible human being. They also say he's not a very good person, or they don't particularly like him, and he says disgusting and indefensible things, and let's see what else. He's actually the most flawed human being running for president in history. This is a lot of very clear character rejection. It's not policy disagreement, it's opprobrium for who Donald Trump is. Now, all those last quotes I just read that you see up here are all from Mick Mulvaney, who now is best known for defending Trump on the Sunday shows about everything.
He pushes back, he fights back when he feels like he's attacked. It has absolutely zero to do with race.
To be clear, you believe Democrats will never see the president's tax returns?
Oh, no, never. No, nor should they.
Mr. Mueller found no collusion and no obstruction.
Right, not a crime. But what about the ethics or morality of those things? Those incidents?
Again, the issue here is not whether it's ethical.
Do you understand that that is offensive to the Americans who do live there?
I understand that everything that Donald Trump says is offensive to some people.
Mulvaney has had to turn on his opposition to Trump, but a lot of other conservatives have too. Now, they say you got to hold your nose to get policy out of this White House. Evangelicals say they supported him because of the Supreme Court, and they got 2 justices. But for Mulvaney, this is different. Everyone knows Donald Trump is exploding the deficit. This month, it's reaching close to $1 trillion. Mulvaney's entire policy agenda in Congress was cutting the deficit, even when that meant going after other Republicans. He roasted the GOP budget in 2015, saying there's no honest way to justify it. Whatever you think about that deficit talk, it was Mulvaney's thing from his very first days in office.
I'm Mick Mulvaney from South Carolina, and as a member of the freshman class, I can't tell you how excited I am about these proposals. I think that anybody who is up to speed on budget issues should be scared to death by what's happening with the debt and the deficit in this country. If you're not losing sleep over it, then you're simply not paying attention.
So pay attention. And cutting spending was so important to him. In 2013, he tried to kill emergency relief for victims of Hurricane Sandy, demanding it had to be immediately offset by budget cuts. I mean, we're talking about emergency funds here.
Is the future of all aid after a natural disaster now contingent, in your view, on corresponding cuts?
Well, I think it is until we get our fiscal house in order.
Get that house in order. Now, did any of this change when he was hired to run Trump's debt-busting government? Not officially. Even in his confirmation hearing under oath, Mulvaney claimed he was still trying to address the debt.
I believe as a matter of principle that the debt is a problem that must be addressed sooner rather than later.
So how does he justify working for a president who's been spending money on things he can't pay for, including these tax cuts, which may or may not affect the recession. Well, when Trump was prepping the State of the Union, Mulvaney was asked if the deficit would be mentioned, and he said, nobody cares. Does Mick Mulvaney have low self-esteem? Mick, I'm here to tell you, you're not nobody. You're somebody. You spent years caring or pretending to care, along with Paul Ryan and the Tea Party, all about the deficit. Was it a lie? Is it hypocrisy? In the times when this question has been raised, Mulvaney says, no, it's not hypocrisy. This is just adjusting to the Beltway.
It's not hypocritical. It's simply adjusting to the Washington, D.C. that we live in. I will always be a deficit hog. I am today, I was yesterday, I will be tomorrow, because I do think that spending a bunch of money that we don't have is wrong. I'm just telling you that this is the cards that we've been dealt as an administration.
The cards we've been dealt. When something happens to you out of your control, those are the cards, and, make do with what you can't control. But Mick Mulvaney wasn't dealt these cards. He wasn't forced to work for Trump. He ran for office, won a seat, resigned it to take this job. So when you get into this level of depth, and this stuff is super important to where we're headed, remember, you can't understand this story just by listening to Mulvaney's analogies. You have to dig deeper. So look at this. According to someone who's really studied this, to understand Mick Mulvaney, you actually have to understand Mike Tyson's famous face tattoo. Journalist Tim Alberta wrote that after the election day, Mulvaney realized after bashing Trump he had to cozy up to him because he was obsessed with power. Alberta writes, he wore his ambition as subtly as a Mike Tyson face tattoo. Upon coming to Congress in 2011, he made few doubt he was the smartest man there and was destined for more. So the values, the deficit, the pledges, Alberta writes that Mulvaney just chucked it out the window and began sucking up. Watching Trump, reading The Art of the Deal, studying his relationships, Mulvaney developed a theory of how to ingratiate himself. He'd do what Paul Ryan had done, sell Trump on the value he brought to the team. It worked. It worked. Trump named him budget director within a month. And notice the words that were used there. Sell to Trump, which for Mulvaney meant selling himself, selling off his past goals, proving to Trump maybe he didn't believe what he'd said, not about deficits, not about the GOP, not about Trump. In other words, selling out. Now, some people might look down on a job applicant willing to do that. Trump clearly likes it. Maybe because it shows ultimate fealty. It reinforces Trump's worldview that maybe nobody really believes anything. Mulvaney sold out. Or as Atlanta rapper Cash Out explains on his song Cashing Out, I'm cashing out, skate on my ice, just like you playing hockey. Grab your camcorder, press record and go and watch me. Well, we expect entrepreneurs to cash out more than public servants. Mulvaney is clearly fine cashing out his beliefs for the currency of power. So to paraphrase Cash Out one more time, let's press record and watch him, because he sure doesn't sound like he used to.
I think that anybody who is up to speed on budget issues should be scared to death by what's happening with the debt and the deficit in this country. If you're not losing sleep over it, then you're simply not paying attention.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.